What's going on, everyone? Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks and Game Time. Today, we're talking realistic expectations for the Patriots rookie class. Obviously, really excited to get hyped about these guys, especially before we actually see them with the pads on playing some real football. And they are very talented, but we also want to make sure that we can both get excited about the things they could bring while also tempering expectations so that they're not too high. And to help me do that, I got my good buddy Justin Melo from the Draft Network, who did a phenomenal job throughout the draft process, interviewing a lot of these prospects, getting to know them, how they think, getting to know their skill sets and things from their perspective. And also, you've done some great work since the draft on some of the hype that's been created around these guys, and even one of the Patriots' undrafted free agents who I know you think can make the roster I'm excited about. So without further ado, Justin Melo, how you doing, brother? And welcome back to the show.
Doing well, Taylor. Appreciate you for having me on. Excited to talk about the Patriots rookie class and some of those undrafted guys that they brought in as well.
Heck yeah, brother. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Before we get into each of the prospects, what did you think generally about the Patriots rookie class? Because obviously going into this, there were expectations that Elliott Wolf said about weaponizing the offense. That didn't come to fruition in free agency, although they did try to get Calvin Ridley. So it was like, all right, now what are the Pats going to do? The offense still isn't very scary. Obviously, 7 out of their 8 picks were on the offensive side of the ball. Only defensive pick was Marcellus Styles. So what did you think about the haul that they ended up getting?
Well, you kind of said it, took the words right out of my mouth. When I look at, new decision makers, right? Elliott Wolf, Jared Mayo, I think the goals going into this draft was to set a new baseline foundation for the future of the offense, right? Like we knew the previous regime didn't get a lot of those picks right on the offensive side of the ball, and they need new starters all over. So what do you end up doing? You come away with a potential franchise quarterback. You get 2 wide receivers. You get a tight end. You get a couple of offensive linemen. It's very clear to me that they wanted to set a foundation for the future of how the Patriots want to play offense.
Yes, sir. And you mentioned that franchise quarterback, Drake May, so let's get right into it. What did you think about him at 3rd overall? Because personally, I thought it was like him and Caleb Williams kind of in their own separate tiers, but clearly at the top. And then I felt like it was kind of Jaden Daniels behind them and then everybody else. Obviously, Jaden goes before Drake May. I wasn't mad at it. I was quite happy. May have lost a little bit of my professionalism when we were doing the live draft show when he was selected, but what did you think about the pick?
Well, I'm in agreement with you in the sense that I had Drake May as my number 2 ranked quarterback. I only had Caleb Williams ranked ahead of him in this class. So I was a fan of the picks for New England. I think that's, of course, anytime you get the 2nd ranked quarterback at number 3, it's going to be good value. So I was a big fan of the pick in the moment. You hear some of the stuff that was coming out of rookie minicamp, the early phase of OTAs. It's early, and we'll get into some of that now. But I'll throw it back to you. Initially, I thought it was a good pick for them in the future of their franchise.
Yeah, and now we're talking about realistic expectations. So coming into the the pros, geez, my goodness. Drake May, everybody knew the footwork was an issue, and it's clear that that's something he's been working on in OTAs, even in rookie minicamp. You could see there's not as much heel clickiness. It's a wider base. A lot of the things that you wanted to see from him, but at the same time, you do have Jacoby Brissett, right? A guy who has proven himself in the NFL. He can be a steady starter for you, maybe not long-term, but if they're rolling and he's the guy who's in charge, you probably feel comfortable sticking with him while Drake May develops behind the scenes. But at the same time, the way I see it is if Drake May is performing well in practices and he starts to push past Jacoby Brissett, it's going to be hard to keep him on the bench. So what do you think is realistic? Should we expect him to play at some point this rookie season? If so, when? And if not, why do you think so?
I do think we should expect him to play at some point during his rookie season. I just don't think it's going to be in week 1, and I don't want to put too much stock into the early reports, but you hear Jared Mayo come out after, was it the 1st or 2nd practice, and say he's got a lot to work on. Some of those reports have been a little bit rough in terms of his performance. That's par for the course this time of year. He's a bit raw, as you said, and he's acclimating to professional football. They brought in a veteran journeyman like Jacoby Brissett for a reason, who started so many games in this league. I do think he's going to be the starter in week 1. Jacoby Brissett is. Where things get interesting for me here is, for example, I do a lot of coverage of the Tennessee Titans, right? Last season, when they started Will Levis for the first time, it was obvious that it was going to come after the bye week. And we see that a lot in the NFL, right? Get a rookie quarterback ready post-bye week. The Patriots might not have that luxury this year. The bye is so late. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. It's like week 14 or 15, I think, right? In 2024.
Yeah, it's the latest one they could possibly get.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to wait that long to get him into the lineup. So the challenge for Coach Mayo and his staff will be, when do we get him ready and how do we get him ready when we don't have the benefit of a bye week to prepare him for his first career start. So I think his first start comes way before the bye week. Not to disappoint your listeners, but I don't think this is going to be a team that wins a ton of football games in 2024. In all honesty, I think there's still a lot of holes on this roster, and it's going to be a work in progress with a first-year head coach and either a rookie quarterback or a low-level veteran starter. So unless they're rolling, which again I don't think they will, if you're at 2-5, 2-6, 3-7, I think that's the point where you decide to make a change and see what you've got in Drake May for the rest of the season.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you look, the schedule makers are clearly setting some kind of checkpoints for Drake May if it's more of a timeline rather than just how he progresses. Because after the halfway point, they're playing the Bears and Caleb Williams. Then there's also Marvin Harrison Jr. in the second half of the season. And then after their bye week, they play Josh Allen twice and Justin Herbert, guys who a lot of people have been comparing Drake May to in terms of skill sets. So I think you're bang on there. Let's move on to Jalen Polk. Now, this is a guy, some people were kind of surprised to see him go in the second round because he doesn't have the elite separation ability or speed that some of the guys around the range that he was selected had. But I do think he was one of the most, if not the most well-rounded prospect in that range, in someone who, I don't want to compare him to Puka Nacua, but when you see the way that Puka was used in terms of they played him at all three receiver spots, as a blocker using him in the box, where he's taking on like linebackers and really tough assignments, I could see that being something that they do with Polk, and I think he's maybe a day one starter. What's your outlook on him?
Well, I agree with you. I thought he was one of the more technically savvy receivers in this class. He's a guy that runs great routes. He's got terrific hands. You kind of talked about the versatility. He played multiple positions in that offense. You could line him up all over the offensive formation and find ways to take advantage of matchups. I look at some of the other receivers that went in that range, guys that went just before him, like a Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette. Those guys might have higher ceilings, but the truth is, I think the bust potential is a little bit greater as well, right? I think you feel a bit more comfortable with what you're getting in Jalen Polk. I don't think he's ever going to be a high-end number one receiver, but I think the Patriots probably felt comfortable with that, thinking, hey, he's going to be one heck of a number 2 or number 3 for us, even as soon as this season.
100%. Now, moving on to another guy who, when he was taken, people are like, oh, that may be a little rich for my blood. But for me, philosophically, if you really like an offensive lineman, I don't think there's a whole lot of reaching you can do because these guys are so rare, especially when it comes to offensive tackles. Now, of course, we're talking about Caden Wallace, someone who spent his career at Penn State at right tackle. But then we were hearing that was just because Olu Fashanu was the left tackle, and you're obviously not going to move him around. And even speaking to Caden Wallace, he sounded pretty confident in his ability to play on the left side. And he said he had some experience actually practicing there in college. So what did you think about that pick? Do you think he's someone that we could see on the field in year one? And if not, when you look at the full rookie contract, when do you think he may be able to enter the lineup and what kind of impact can he make?
Well, I had a good chuckle about this pick with my coworkers at the Draft Network because I want to say he was the first guy drafted that our scouts didn't have a fully completed scouting report on, published on the website. But I had an interview with him on the Draft Network website, so we had something with him, and I got to rub it in their faces jokingly a little bit, saying, hey, I knew what I was doing with this kid. And that happens to me every year. Last year, funny enough, there was another Penn State guy. It was Juice Scruggs, who went around the same pick, I think, borderline top 100, who I also had an interview with. But and that's no shot at my coworkers, because a lot of people thought this guy was going to get drafted in the 4th or 5th round. I was never on board with that belief. Interviewing him, talking to sources, I was privy to some of that information, and I thought he was going to go right where the Patriots took him. I had a borderline top 100 grade on this player. I like the player a lot. He's athletic. He's got great size. I think he's versatile enough to play both in left and right tackle, like you said. In fact, I see him pushing Chugs Okorafor for that job this year at left tackle. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chucks was the left tackle last year in Pittsburgh, I believe. But they made
He was
the decision.
right. So he was right in Pittsburgh, but he played left in college.
Sorry, correct. Yeah, so I'm sorry. He was right in Pittsburgh. That's where I wanted to go with it because he was right in Pittsburgh, and now they're thinking about kicking him to the left over there in New England. So that's an acclamation for him as well. Just like Caden Wallace going through a bit of an acclamation. Chucks has to go through a bit of one as well. And let's be honest, a low-level starter in Pittsburgh he was, and that's why the Steelers eventually made the decision to try and replace him. I like Caden Wallace. There's not a whole lot standing in his way here. I think he's got a terrific opportunity to push Chucks for this starting left tackle job. I pumped the brakes on Drake May being a week one guy. I feel better about Caden Wallace being a week one guy potentially if things go his way in training camp.
You redeemed yourself with the listeners, buddy. There you go. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I personally love Prize Picks because they're super easy to use, easy to navigate, and they offer injury insurance, so your entries stay live even if one of your players gets injured. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, and then the Patriots' next pick was another offensive lineman. Now, because the person they ended up getting with their second fourth-round pick wasn't taken, I was initially pretty disappointed. But when you look at Layden Robinson's film, it is really impressive. He is a guy where, when you listen, I know Jim Nagy has said that he thinks this is a guy who could be a starter early on in his career. And when you take an interior offensive lineman that high in the draft, you're kind of expecting he's probably going to contribute pretty early. So what did you think about Layden Robinson, specifically in this Alex Van Pelt wide zone scheme, where in college he pulled a lot, but it was more gap schemes rather than the kind of, again, wide zone that he's probably going to be running in New England?
Well, there could be a potential conflict of interest there. I'm not completely familiar with Van Pelt's system. To my knowledge, it does derive from the West Coast offense, right? He comes from some of those same coaching disciples. I'll admit, I think Layden Robinson was a better fit as like a phone booth blocker. I saw him as more of a mauler than I did some terrific athlete that thrives in space. So it's worth monitoring if there's a conflict of interest there. What this pick told me more so than anything was, the previous regime, they drafted a bunch of interior blockers, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, just last year, right? And I don't know that they're a great fit for the incoming regime. So to me, it's a bit of a do-over with some of those picks that, Mayo may not have agreed with, Elliott Wolf may not have agreed with, that Bill Belichick made. There was was it Jake Andrews? I think it was, Antonio Mafi. Like, they took a bunch of interior guys the year before. To me, it almost signals a do-over. In that regard, that they've taken another interior guy, or they've taken their first interior guy here, if you will. And then I look at the injury to Cole Strange, right? A lot of whispers that he may not be ready to go to start the 2024 season. I think Layden Robinson gives them another option across the interior, particularly at left or right guard. If Cole Strange isn't ready to go, and you pair that with maybe they don't love the guys that the previous regime took in 2023.
Yeah, and with Cole Strange, he might not even come back till midseason. We actually saw City So, one of the guys they took last season, who actually played really well. They moved him to the left guard spot where he naturally played in college. So I wouldn't be mad to see City on the left side and then Layden Robinson on the right. Then you have really what looks like your future at that interior offensive line spot. Although whenever Cole Strange does come back, it'll be interesting. And plus, when you miss so much time off the field, like Cole, he also missed almost all of last summer. There's no guarantee that just because he can return that he's going to be 100% or even somebody that you want to get on the field immediately. So the Layden Robinson pick, as soon as it was made, it kind of set off alarm bells like something might be going on in that Patriots offensive line room. All right, now the Patriots' second fourth-round pick, one of my favorite values in this entire draft. I think the Patriots got a few really good values, but Javon Baker is someone I think could be a legit separator and vertical threat as an X receiver. Potential to be, I think, a #1. I understand that that's a debatable kind of projection, but the skill set and the mentality are really what make me think that he could be a special kind of player. What do you think about him and what he could potentially be, both maybe as a rookie when he'll really start coming along, and then maybe by the end of his rookie deal?
Well, you took some of the words right out of my mouth, because this was my favorite pick the Patriots made and as much as I love Drake May, when you kind of pair the value, I can't believe this guy went in the 4th round. I mean, I was obsessed with him throughout the pre-draft process. I mean, you look at some of the stuff like the reception perception, the profile. He's an alpha male, go get it type of receiver. He's got that X mentality, and that's part of the reason I love the pick, because when I look at this receiver room, number one, as you know, there's a lot to sort through, right? There are, in my opinion, it's made up similarly to last year. And I know that sounds a little concerning, but initially I see a lot of 2s and 3s. I don't know who the 1 is. In a room like this, it wouldn't shock me that a guy like Javon Baker can come out and command that X role. You got guys like Tyquan Thornton, he's not an X. Juju Smith-Schuster is not an X. Jalen Polk is not an X. Who's the other kid? Demario Douglas is not an X, right? So as much as there's lots of competition for spots in that room, I don't think there's a ton standing in Baker's way if he does set his sights on being the starting caliber X that this offense so desperately needs. I love this player. You've already seen it. Was it the workout he posted on social media where he talked about he couldn't believe how many receivers were drafted before him? I think he had the exact number. I had like an early 3rd round grade on him. So for the Patriots to go out and get him in the 4th, in fact, I think I was slightly higher on him than I was on Polk, to be totally honest with you. And I liked Polk. So it doesn't matter where you get him as long as you get them, right? So really a huge, huge fan of this pick. And because of the nature of the way this receiver room is built, with a lot of sort of, Z receivers, a lot of slot types, and no high-end one, I think Baker's got one hell of a chance to make a quick, immediate impact.
Whenever Baker comes up, I like to also ask about some things that he needs to work on or things that worry you, because it's really easy to get caught up in all the things that he could be, and I think he will be. But what are some things that kind of took him out of the range of more like a 2nd-round player? Because I think when you look at the highlights, it's like this is maybe like a 1st, 2nd-round kind of guy, because that ceiling is so high. But of course, there was a reason that he did slip.
Well, he was so dominant at the catch point, but I think some of the separation stuff could have been better, right? A lot of times when those guys are so great at the catch point, they've got a guy draped on them. Well, why do they got a guy draped on them, right? Because they didn't separate throughout the course of the route. So I think there are some questions there when it comes to creating separation consistently, but I'm a huge, huge fan of the player.
For sure. All right, now, Marcellus Dial, the one defensive player taken by the Patriots, very versatile defensive back, someone that Gerard Mayo actually said they were hyped to get him. They didn't really think he was going to be there. I love his energy and his personality. Like you saw when he got taken, he had like his shirt off, he's popping bottles and stuff. But also, again, he is renowned for his intelligence and the versatility. Watching his film, what jumped out to me was how he plays the run. You don't really see cornerbacks chasing plays to the middle of the field to try to make tackles on running backs. And this is a guy who was not afraid of contact. He'll throw his body out there to try to cut down an offensive lineman. So I'm curious what you think about his game and what he could potentially bring to the Patriots, maybe as a rookie if he can kind of work his way into the lineup, but also long-term.
Well, what jumped out to me about him when I studied his tape was the inside-outside versatility. I think he can move around. You talked about what Coach Mayo said. I think he could play boundary. I think he could play the nickel. I will say my favorite spot for him is probably the nickel, and it's because of what you said. I thought he was such a good run defender. Those opportunities to play the nickel, bring you a little closer to the line of scrimmage, that leans favorably for a corner like him that likes to play in run support. Right? Now, this is a really tough defensive lineup to crack. It's not like some of the offensive spots we talked about. There's a lot of depth on this defense. There's some good depth at corner. So he's going to have his work cut out for him, especially as a day 3 guy trying to impact this defense from an early onset. But I do love the versatility. I love the mentality to tackle. I think he'll play on special teams right away. And if the opportunity arises, I could see him carving out a role for himself at the nickel, just because, like you said, because he's so competitive. He brings so much energy to the table. I think those are 2 traits you need when you're going to play the nickel. And I also think he loves to tackle, so it allows him to kind of peek into the backfield and come downhill when he reads his keys.
100%. And that outside cornerback spot, there's not a lot of proven talent. Obviously, Christian Gonzalez I think everybody's high on him. He does still need to prove he can do it throughout an entire season, but I don't think anybody's questioning that he can. Jonathan Jones, incredibly tough, so good and so consistent, can play in either spot. But then on the outside, you're looking at maybe Alex Austin, Isaiah Bolden, Marco Wilson. Again, guys that aren't super proven, but that have talent, and in the hands of someone like Mike Pellegrino could emerge as guys who start for you. So then with Marcellus Dial, I'm thinking, Miles Bryant's not here anymore. So if you want kind of that early down kind of nickel corner who plays a lot of zone, so he's not necessarily in man-to-man, although I think Dial can do that. Also, sometimes Miles Bryant would kick back and end up playing safety because they like to move those guys around in certain packages. I like him as maybe sliding into that role until he proves that he can really be someone who's on the field every down. Now, Joe Milton, one of the more interesting guys to watch in OTAs and rookie minicamp so far, because Drake May has an outstanding arm. It's obvious. This is a guy who off his back foot can throw with touch and accuracy like 50, 60 yards downfield. But Joe Milton is in that caliber of like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, where it's just like these guys are freaks. Like there's great arm strength, and then there's just I genuinely don't know how a human can throw it that far. But obviously, there's also a lot of things he needs to work on, which is why he was taken in the 6th round. So what are your expectations for Joe Milton? Do you think he's going to end up sticking at quarterback? Can he maybe make his way onto this team? Or do you think maybe we end up seeing him potentially switch positions?
Well, my expectation right now is exactly what he is. He's a developmental quarterback that has all the physical skills and attributes, as you said. Those are the perfect types to take a chance on day 3, because if you can develop everything else and, coach out some of the sloppy footwork, make them a better pre-snap and post-snap reader of the game, then all of a sudden you marry that with the physical tools and you've got one hell of a football player. Now, we know the truth is those things rarely come to fruition. We see a lot of Malik Willis's, and remember, was it Tyree Jackson coming out of Buffalo like almost a decade ago? That was a similar player with the physical tools. Ended up switching to tight end, I think. But look, and now the rules, they've made it so favorable where it makes sense to take a chance on developmental quarterbacks, right? You can carry a quarterback 3 on the roster. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have to be active to be the quarterback 3 on game day. They don't count towards like the 48-man game day designation. So when the rules changed, and by the way, I was a huge fan of that rule change, it made more sense for you to roster like a 3rd developmental quarterback. That's what they've got in Joe Milton. I think they're going to work with him at quarterback for now. I don't necessarily foresee a position change in his future. And honestly, how often does that work out? When it almost never, right? Like it's so rare. So I think they'll work with him at quarterback for now. I see a practice squad type quarterback. Maybe he's on the 53 because of that game day designation rule. But certainly, you're in love with the physical tools.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed out that it's not easy for guys to switch positions. You're talking about he just moves to tight end. People spend a decade trying to hone their craft and be good tight ends, and then you see it doesn't work out for them. So there are the rare cases where it does work out, and I think it's fair to bring up because there are significant concerns when it comes to Joe Milton's game and whether or not he can play in the league and whether maybe he would be best suited as an NFL player at another position. But it's not as easy as, Madden might make it seem. With the NBA playoffs in full swing and the Celtics looking like the best team in the East, I'm trying to go to a game so I can witness their greatness in person. And to get those tickets, I'm going to be using Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Buying tickets on Game Time is extremely easy. All you have to do is click on the team that you want to see, browse through the available options, then click on those games. Then you can go through filters like price, where you want your seat to be, all that good stuff. Click, get a panoramic view of the seat that you're going to buy, and it can be as easy as a one-click purchase for your ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, now last but certainly not least, another one of my favorite value picks for the Patriots, Jaheim Bell, 7th round pick. Now, he was getting some buzz as like a 4th, 5th round pick. I didn't love that because while I do love the skill set, I feel like as a blocker, he doesn't give you the kind of day one skill that you'd want from someone who you would take in the 4th or 5th round. And then as a receiver, while he's super explosive, he's not the best when it comes to change of direction. You know, he can make guys miss in space and he's tough, but he kind of like turns like a tugboat a little bit there. So not a perfect prospect, but he has an elite athletic profile, which you tend to see with the tight ends that succeed. It tends to happen towards the end of that rookie contract, and it's usually the freak athlete. So what are you expecting from him early on and potentially, like I said, towards the end of that rookie contract where he may be able to really find his place in the offense and truly blossom?
Well, I love the pick of Jaheim Bell. I'm with you. I had a 4th or 5th round grade on him. I was a little surprised he went as late as he did. He doesn't look. He lacks that some of the great athletic. He lacks that great change of direction, as you said. But the athletic profile is impressive. You look at the relative athletic score; it'll drop your jaw, sort of thing. That lacks the prototypical build of a tight end, right? He's a bit undersized, but he also makes him very compact with a low center of gravity. He's great after the catch. He's explosive, like you said. You know who he reminds me a lot of is a Tennessee Titans tight end, Chig Okonkwo. You know, and Okonkwo, you know, he was like a 4th or 5th rounder in Tennessee. He's got that same sort of similar compact, low built to the ground build. And they've done a good job getting him involved in the offense, right? He's really good after the catch. Okonkwo is. I think Bell has the same potential. If they get creative with him, if you go back and watch Okonkwo's rookie tape, the Titans did a lot of things just designing to get him the ball like in his hands near the line of scrimmage. And he just made stuff happen after the catch. I think Jaheim Bell is capable of doing something similar. Yes, he lacks that sort of day one blocker skill set, but nowadays, the way you should be building your tight end room, in my opinion, you should have a guy like Bell. You should have a guy that's somewhere in the middle, that's a good receiver and can also block. And then you should have like a designated blocker as your number 3 that can come in and serve as an extension of the offensive line. So I think there's room for Bell to have a lot of success in this league. I thought that was great value in the 7th round. I'm a huge fan of what he can do in the passing game, and I think he's going to outperform his draft slot for the Patriots.
100%. Then when you look at how the Browns use their tight ends, of course, we don't know exactly what Alex Van Pelt's scheme will look like. When you mentioned like the designated blocking tight end, I thought they needed that, like a true Y type, like a Tip Raymond or someone like that. But they used a ton of extra offensive linemen, and the Patriots obviously have some rookies that probably aren't going to be in the starting lineup early on. So you could maybe see them using really tight or as extra tight ends, just use a big offensive lineman. Like if you know that these guys aren't going to catch a pass, you might as well just get the value in the run game off play action. Then you get the kind of in-betweens with Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. And then Jaheim Bell, who can be more of like Harrison Bryant type H-back, fullback, who you move all around the formation. All right, now we wrapped up the draft class. Let's talk about some undrafted rookie free agents, guys that you really like and think could potentially make this New England squad.
Well, I actually wrote an article on the Draft Network very recently. I had to handpick one of them, and I went with Charles Turner, the center from LSU. Now, I know we talked about how much interior offensive linemen they have. It's a tall mountain to climb for him, but certainly maybe he beats out an Antonio Mafia, Andrews, the center they took the year before as well by the previous regime. Charles Turner was at the Senior Bowl. I thought he looked good out there in Mobile. I'll be honest, I liked his performance at the Senior Bowl better than I did the tape that I analyzed throughout the season. But I thought he had a good enough Senior Bowl where he was going to get drafted. So I was a little surprised that he didn't. Not a lot of Senior Bowl guys went undrafted, right? I think they had more than 100 picks this year. The Senior Bowl did. So it tells you how great of a job they do identifying guys that are going to get drafted, that are on NFL teams' radar. So I was a little surprised he didn't get drafted. I like what he brings to the table. He showed a willingness to compete in Mobile. I think he's going to do the same thing throughout training camp in the preseason here. Again, a lot of interior linemen on this roster. It's not going to be easy, but I do think there's enough intrigue with Charles Turner that he's going to make that thing a battle throughout training camp.
And we actually saw they had a picture of OTAs where they had 4 different offensive linemen snapping. There was David Andrews, Nick Leverett, a guy who has center background that they signed as a free agent, Antonio Mafi, who's been getting more opportunities there after it seemed like he was purely a guard, and Charles Turner, but no Jake Andrews. Don't want to look too much into that because we don't have any context. But the fact that Charles Turner was one of the top 4, I did think was interesting. And I think they're trying to cross-train him and see if he can hold up at guard. I know there were some one-on-one reps at the Senior Bowl where he was at guard. And I completely agree. When you look at the one-on-ones, like he was stoning guys. And you would not expect the kind of performance he had from someone who didn't go drafted. So we'll see how that plays out. But it would be great if they could get a sneaky guy to potentially take over for David Andrews a couple years down the road.
Well, I always say, if you can play center, you can probably play guard, right? Because if you can handle all the responsibilities that come with playing center, you can probably kick over one spot to your left or one spot in your right and play guard. The real challenge is when you haven't played center and you're a guard, and then you're asked to do that, right? Because now it's like all the responsibilities that you're not used to. So I'm with you. I fully believe Charles Turner is capable of playing center. And by the way, I'm glad you dropped that tidbit about Mafi, because that's a guy I can see being on the roster bubble. You said he was strictly a guard, and now they're playing him at center. What does that tell me? They want to know if he's got the versatility to stick on that 53. They're cross-training him there for a reason. You're going to have to play multiple positions if you're going to stick on this competition, because like a ton of interior linemen there vying for back-end roster spots. So if a guy like Charles Turner proves he's got more versatility, can play more positions, has a better camp than Mafi does, I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be on equal footing with him going into the summer.
Justin, always appreciate your insights, buddy. A blast as always. Thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, please let the people know where they can find you and what great stuff you've got coming down the pipeline that we should be looking out for.
Follow me on Twitter at JustinM_NFL. We're doing terrific work at the Draft Network. Our in-house scouts are just kicking off their summer scouting series already. That's for the 2025 NFL Draft. So no rest for the wicked for our in-house scouts. They know what comes with this territory. And I'm working on 2 series right now for the Draft Network. One is a UDFA to make every single roster. These are deep dives into all 32 teams in their UDFA class. As I said, the Patriots piece is already completed. If you want to go read up on Charles Turner and what I thought of him throughout this process. And I'm also working on a series that is a make or break year for every single team. Well, one player on the roster. So I haven't done the Patriots yet, so you guys can look forward to that. I'll have to pick a player more than likely from the 2022 draft class. I'm trying to keep it to like third-year players who have had sort of, so-so first and second years, and now it's a real big third prove-it year. So lots of stuff coming down the pipeline over at the Draft Network.
Looking forward to that and highly recommend the Charles Turner piece. Really, it got me on the bandwagon of, okay, maybe this guy could make the roster. He was someone I didn't know a ton about beforehand, but it really made me want to do more research. So once again, thank you so much for your time, buddy. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you next time. Peace, y'all.